Hi. Hi,
Hello.
Ashley. It's so good to see you.
So good to see you too.
It's been a while.
Yeah, thanks. I think it was Thanksgiving last year that we met in
Yeah,
person.
yeah. So we met with Ashley in person in Colorado. I was traveling there with my family, and I decided to gather local experts on women's health, hormonal health. So we did a little brunch, and Ashley was one of the guests of this brunch, and we had such an amazing time having conversations about hormones, longevity, menstrual cycles, like just an amazing time with women specializing in women's health. And I'm very excited to have you today, Ashley, to answer some of the great questions our community has regarding balancing hormones. So,
Yeah, super
Ashley,
excited to be here.
yeah, Ashley is a hormonal health coach and the founder of Solara Health and Wellness. She is helping women with such important things such as irregular or non-existing periods, heavy or painful periods, mood swings, cravings, low energy and afternoon crashes, lack of weight loss despite heavy life cycle efforts, and coming off birth control, doctor prescribed birth control. Ashley, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up working in hormonal health?
Yeah, sure. So I live out in Colorado. I live in a small mountain town out here. Love being outside, love being active. As far as my professional career, I was actually in tech for quite a while, so completely different arena. Crunching numbers, working with data in the advertising industry, and just kind of got to a point where I wasn't feeling super fulfilled by it. I wasn't really like feeling good about what I was doing, and was also in a bit of a toxic environment. So left that and just kind of took some time to, I don't know, think about like what I actually wanted to do because I kind of had a chance to start over. And I've always been super into health. So kind of kept coming back to that and seeing what I could do with that. I was also kind of on my own hormonal health journey at that point. So working with a hormone doctor. Um, and I landed on health coaching. So did a program through what's called the Integrative Institute of Nutrition. So I got trained through them, did a mentorship with my personal hormone doctor, and then launched my business. So now I see clients on my own. I actually am also working as a health coach for my doctor as a supportive role. So kind of have the best of both worlds there, working for someone and then working for myself too.
Yeah, totally. So you mentioned that your own hormonal journey influenced your decision to help other women. Would you be open to share a little bit more? Like, what was this journey and what were the struggles that you experienced?
Yeah, so I was on hormonal birth control for quite a while, really on and off pretty much my entire life. Got to a point where I was just struggling with like brain fog, low libido, a little bit of anxiety and depression. And I was talking to a friend and she's like, "Hey, I know you're on birth control. Like, have you considered that might be contributing to some of these things?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, totally." And this was like before I got all my training, so I had no idea. It's just that's just what you do. You take birth control. So I stopped taking it, and without support, which I would not advise, just stopped taking it cold turkey and started getting these really bad periods. So really heavy periods, painful periods, and just like I don't know. I just felt like there wasn't a good option out there. It's like either be on birth control and feel not well on that, or come off and also deal um, with these periods. And I was also having some gut issues and energy issues. So it was a pretty big plethora of symptoms. But luckily, kind of stumbled across a podcast with my doctor. Her name's Dr. Danielle. Definitely check out her podcast. She's super informative, and I was just like, wow, like there's a whole world that I had no idea about with hormones and just so much that you can do. So
Yeah.
through working with her, I now have, I always had regular periods, but I now have very, what I would call peaceful periods.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Peaceful
So,
periods.
yeah.
Yeah, and if you can share the link to the podcast after
Yeah,
our
definitely.
live, we will
Sure.
definitely share it with our followers because
Okay.
it's a very important topic for so many women in our community. We know that many women are on hormonal birth control and are not sure how to come off, even
Yeah,
if they want to. It's a scary transition.
it is.
And
Yeah.
when you have such regulated cycles and all of a sudden, like your period returns and all of the side effects of having a natural menstrual cycle return.
Yeah.
So, from your work, I'm curious to ask you, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you work with related to women's hormonal health?
I'd say there's a lot of them. This is really one of my missions is to kind of debunk some of these things. Number one, I would say is that women are meant to suffer through their periods, or, having PMS is just part of being a woman. So that's number one. Number two, I would say, and we kind of touched on this, that birth control is balancing your hormones. It's not balancing your hormones. And then lastly, I think just this is kind of more of a broad thing, but a lot of the health trends out there, when we really dive deep into them, a lot of them are based off of studies and data that were done on men and
That's
women.
crazy.
Yeah, it's this is something I get so fired up about because women historically have been excluded because our cycles make us difficult. And we're 50% of the population, and that's such a
Yeah,
huge opportunity. Like, include women so we can understand our cycles and we can understand what we should be doing. But a lot of these trends, women are taking at face value and saying, oh, I'm going to try this because this influencer is saying it, or even doctors are saying, hey, try this. And it can really backfire, especially when it comes to hormones.
totally, totally. Yeah, we recently had a podcast club when we heard Dr. Stacy Sims
Yeah,
like share a tip that once you hear about a new health trend coming out, question where it's coming from.
sure.
Who are the people who tried it? Who are the people who it worked for? Were the
Yeah,
women among these people? So like do your own research before
yeah.
jumping on every health trend. Yeah, I love that. So you
I love
mentioned
Stacey
that,
Stims. Yeah.
yeah, she's amazing. You mentioned that we are not meant to suffer. And that sounds refreshing because so many women are, like including myself, are suffering from menstrual cycles, PMS, all these mood swings. What are some of the like easy ways? Are there any easy ways to make it easier, make it smoother, peaceful, as you mentioned?
Yeah, there's lots of ways, and I think it's definitely dependent on the situation that you're dealing with. But like, something I can think of that comes to mind is limiting alcohol and caffeine, because when you think about our hormones, um, our basically, let me break it down for you because a lot of women haven't had this education. So, this is a very basic kind of
Hmm.
picture of the menstrual cycle. But in the first half of the cycle, your estrogen is the dominant hormone. So, that's kind of your energizing hormone. It gives you energy, it makes you social. And then that kind of tails down. And then progesterone becomes your significant or your dominant hormone in the second
Yeah.
half of your cycle. And that's more the calming hormone. It helps you sleep, helps you with stress. So a lot of women are dealing with something called estrogen dominance, where estrogen is too high in proportion to progesterone. So it's dominating your progesterone. And what we want to focus on is detoxifying that estrogen. So, whenever you have substances like caffeine or alcohol in your system, your liver is going to prioritize detoxing those substances because those are, according to the liver, those are life threatening substances. So, it's going to
Hmm.
prioritize that and it's not going to detoxify your estrogen. And then you're going to end up with some of these symptoms like mood swings, cramping, heavy periods.
Right.
So that's something that's pretty low hanging fruit. I would say the other thing is stress support. This is an interesting one. So I mentioned progesterone being your kind of calming hormone in the second half of your cycle. Well, progesterone competes directly with, it comes from the same precursor hormone as cortisol. So that's bad news because, again, your body, if you go back to kind of like how your body works, your body's always going to prioritize survival over reproduction. So if you're in a
Mm-hmm.
stress state, that precursor hormone is going to produce cortisol and it's going to sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
progesterone. So if you can
Mm-hmm.
manage your stress, that's going to help bring your progesterone back up, or at least give your body more of an opportunity to produce it.
Okay, so if I get it right, estrogen is competing, like liver is either working on your like estrogen dominance on balancing this,
Mm-hmm.
or like getting caffeine and alcohol out of your system. So
Yeah,
if you want to balance your estrogen, like cutting off caffeine and alcohol is the easiest, like low-hanging fruit.
yeah,
And when
it's
we
a good
talk
way to do
about,
that.
yeah, and for progesterone, it's actually stress levels. Managing
Mm-hmm.
stress levels could help you get your progesterone to
Sure,
the
yeah.
right levels. That's so interesting. So how do you know in the first place if you have estrogen dominance?
I mean, it's, you could do it one of two ways. A lot of times it's pretty clear through symptoms. So most of the typical PMS symptoms you're seeing,
Yeah.
cramping, bloating, mood swings, breast tenderness, those tend to be signs of estrogen dominance. You can also get a blood test. So
Mm-hmm.
you can test, typically, I like to test estrogen on day 2 or 3 as kind of a preliminary test, but then also testing both progesterone and estrogen about 7 days after ovulation. So
Right.
if we look at a 28-day cycle, that's a day 21, but it's
Mm-hmm.
important to customize that to your specific cycle because not everybody is the same. And looking at, you can actually see your levels of progesterone versus estrogen,
Right.
and that can give you a good idea because estrogen dominance isn't always high estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
It can be normal estrogen but low progesterone. It can be high normal progesterone but high estrogen. So that kind of gives you an idea of where you want to focus your attention, whether that's supporting detoxing estrogen or supporting progesterone production,
Yeah.
or both.
Right, right. So as I can hear, it's highly individual how your levels can be balanced, and looking at the data is the best way to figure out where you are and what you can do to help you feel better.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I might be a little biased because I love data, but
Yeah,
that's
with
always
data too.
that's always going to give you the clearest picture.
Yeah, I mean, at Strawberry Health, we do
Yeah.
hormonal tests to collect this data, and this
Yeah,
is where we can help.
I love that you guys are doing that. I love that you're making it more accessible. This testing isn't something that a lot of your conventional doctors are going to do.
Yeah.
Um, some are open to it, some will give you pushback. So it's amazing seeing companies like Strawberry Health coming out and being able to kind of advocate for yourself and do that testing on your own.
Totally, totally. We believe that knowledge is power. The more
Yeah,
we know about our bodies, the better equipped we are to feel better.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I do see a question from one of our followers and related to what you just shared. How much time do we need without caffeine and alcohol to say that it's working for me?
That's going to depend because there's so many more factors to it, right? So like it might not just be you make that one change and everything is going to get better. You might, like in the case I was talking about, you might still have to support your progesterone too. So it's a good place to start. Typically, when we're looking at improving our hormones and our symptoms, we are typically looking at about 3 months at least
Hmm.
to see change, and that's really powerful knowledge too because I think it can be discouraging. You're like, oh, I gave up coffee this month and my period was still really painful and I didn't notice any changes, but really try to stick with that for 3 to 4 months. A
Mm-hmm.
good place to start too is like if you are a big coffee and alcohol person, don't try and just cut it out, right? That's going to be really challenging. So a good place to start is like the closer you are to your period, the more important it is to stay away from alcohol and caffeine. So maybe start
Mm-hmm.
with your period first. We're not doing alcohol and caffeine on our period. Okay, extend that a week out and kind of work your way out. The other thing I would say, and this isn't necessarily answering this question, but a lot of times what I've discovered with a lot of my clients, specifically with caffeine, is that it's more habitual than anything. So really
Mm-hmm.
tuning into like, okay, people drinking 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day, is that second, third cup, fourth cup, are those like, do you need the caffeine? Do you need that energy boost? Or is it just like I'm at work and it's there and I like having a warm beverage? So maybe swapping that out for an herbal tea. Dandelion root tea is a great tea because it supports the liver and detoxification. So maybe kind
Yeah.
of balancing out that caffeine with something that will also support the liver.
Yeah. Dandelion tea. I've never heard of this. Can you find it in stores?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So would you recommend like adding it on some particular stage of your menstrual cycle or like just everyday swap for caffeine?
If you can do it every day, that would be amazing. If you don't love it and you want to know like when should I really be prioritizing this, I would say second half of your cycle because that's when
Okay.
the pressure is on the liver to start detoxifying that estrogen.
Okay. Makes sense. I do see another question. Why do people sometimes have severe nausea during ovulation or PMS? Is feeling of nausea also hormonal?
Nausea can be hormonal. A lot of times that is due to, again, the same thing going back to estrogen dominance. Particularly low progesterone can cause nausea. So, again, making sure that you're doing things to support your progesterone, stress support. There's certain nutrients that your body needs. Vitamin C is really important, vitamin B6 is really important for progesterone support, and then doing the things to detoxify that estrogen should help with the nausea.
Okay. Well, great tips. So, do you have any suggestions for our community members who are currently on hormonal birth control and want to try and come off, but in a sustainable way without
Sure.
experiencing any like heavy, crazy side effects?
Yeah, definitely. My first suggestion, and yes, this of course is biased, is find either a holistic doctor or a health coach that can support you through it. But if you're going to do it on your own, definitely preparing your body before just stopping. So when we think about coming off of birth control, we want to think about a few things. One would be supporting the liver. So, we already talked about
Hmm.
the liver's role in detoxifying hormones. Synthetic birth control is just that. It's synthetic hormones that's being pumped into your body. So making sure that your liver is in a good place to be able to detoxify those hormones is really important. You can do that through dandelion root tea is really good. Milk thistle can be really good for that. Cruciferous vegetables are great. They contain a compound called DIM that helps detoxify estrogen. So supporting the livers first, and then I would also say supporting the gut is really important because the gut also plays a role in detoxification. So getting, some probiotic rich foods like kimchi, yogurt, that kind of thing, making sure you're having bowel movements every day is going to help with that detoxification. And then replenishing nutrients that there's specific nutrients that birth control depletes. So specifically, B vitamins, magnesium, and zinc are some big ones that the pill is generally depleting. So
Hmm.
finding those through food is the best. Even I like to put clients on a prenatal when they're coming off of birth control because a prenatal is basically just like an amped up multivitamin. So that's going to replenish some of those lost stores so that when you come off of it, your body is able to rebound a little bit quicker. So I would say those are three biggest things to do.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful to know. And in your program, when you work with clients, do you usually begin like implementing these changes before people come off birth control, or is it done at the same time?
Yeah, I would say at least 1 to 2 months before coming off, starting this support to prepare your body so that when you do come off, you're not getting those post pill symptoms. So, a lot of people get acne, a lot of people get really heavy periods. So, you're almost starting to, you're not balancing you're starting to balance your hormones even though you're still
Mm-hmm.
pumping those hormones in. It's basically preparing your body to detoxify the impacts and making sure your stores of those certain vitamins and minerals are adequate so that when your hormones start working naturally again, they have kind of the best opportunity to do that.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I do see another question, and I think it can be related to your coaching program. So, do you have a favorite period tracking app? Do you do you know of any that provide diet or other suggestions at different stages of the cycle? Because I know you can provide these suggestions as a
Yeah.
hormone health coach, but do you use any apps or can people use any apps to support themselves?
Yeah. So I personally use an app called Stardust. I really like it. I don't know. Have you heard of it?
I've heard about it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't use it, but I've heard about it.
It's that one's not free. I don't, it's not very expensive. I forget how much, but I really like because they kind of do like an astrological theme to it, which can be fun. And every day you go in and they kind of make this, it's almost like a little snarky. It adds a little bit of humor to things and it tells you what's going on. I really like that one. I wouldn't say it has a ton of like diet suggestions or lifestyle suggestions. If you're looking for that, there is one called, I don't know if it's Flow or In the Flow, and it's just
Hmm.
spelled FLO. And that
Yeah.
one is very informational. That one also is paid. You're typically not going to find a free app that's going to give that kind of person that kind of support based on where you are in your cycle. But
Yes.
that one's really good because it will give you kind of lists of foods. Oh, you're in this part of your cycle. Here are some foods you should focus on. Here are they even give you recipes, which is pretty
Oh,
cool.
that's
So I would
amazing.
say if that's something that you're looking for, the Flow app would be probably the best fit.
Okay, okay. We'll also gather all of this links that you're sharing during this live to share with
Sure.
our followers. So, in your practice, what are some of the most common hormonal imbalances that you see in women?
Estrogen dominance is definitely the most common that I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So we touched on that already. So that's
Yeah.
high estrogen compared to your progesterone, resulting in those typical PMS symptoms. So priorities there are going to be detoxifying estrogen, supporting liver and gut health, um, and then supporting progesterone production through stress support and certain lifestyle changes. I would say next on the list is PCOS. So that's
Mm-hmm.
polycystic ovarian syndrome. And typically, what this looks like, there's three criteria that are going to give you an official diagnosis. If you have two of these three criteria, you would be officially diagnosed with PCOS. And those are irregular cycles. So that's defined as cycles longer than 35 days. A lot of women with PCOS are going months without a period. Um, Polycystic ovaries. So basically, if your doctor does an ultrasound and
Mm-hmm.
sees that, that's another qualification. And then lastly is elevated androgen hormones. So we think
Mm-hmm.
of androgen hormones more as like the male hormones, DHEAS and testosterone. And you can either see that through a blood test or kind of clinical findings would be acne, hair loss, hair growth on the face, maybe the chest, the back, areas where women don't typically see hair. So if you have two of those three criteria, you have PCOS. And there's different types of PCOS. I would say by far the most common is insulin resistant PCOS. So this is more related to metabolic health actually.
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing a lot of insulin resistance, women having trouble controlling their blood sugar. So you're going to see elevated fasting glucose, elevated hemoglobin A1C, which is basically a marker. It's a 3-month average of your glucose levels, and then
Yeah.
elevated insulin.
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting that it has that metabolic component, but blood sugar and hormones are extremely related. So it's basically
Yeah.
getting in the way of ovulation. So with PCOS, what we want to do specifically that type, we want to work on blood sugar support. So that's getting fiber and protein with every meal. Um, Watching out for added sugars, processed carbs, and then lifestyle changes like going for walks after meals, because that can really help with blood sugar. Um, and then, yeah, managing stress is a big one for PCOS. It's
Right.
any hormonal condition you want to manage your stress. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and then lastly, I would say kind of the third most common thing I'm seeing is generally just unexplained infertility.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so infertility is defined as when you're trying to conceive for over a year without success. And then the causes and approach you would take for those would definitely vary based on the situation.
Right, right. Wow. Okay. There are so many imbalances that women can experience. And you know how often we hear from women who end up being diagnosed with PCOS that their doctor initially was like just suggesting to lose weight, eat healthier, and it wasn't working out. But
Yep.
when they finally got it diagnosed, it answered so many questions and symptoms that they experienced. So I love how you like putting it into very particular like areas to monitor and see if this is something that you experience so you can get this diagnosis much faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, in our blood test, we also look at AMH levels, ovarian reserve, because
Mm-hmm.
it's often elevated alongside elevated androgens.
Right.
And it can be one of the signals that, okay, you can look deeper into the other symptoms that you can experience.
Totally. Yeah.
We do have a question related to PCOS and experiencing miscarriage. So I'm wondering if you can add something. Let me read it out. As someone who has been suffering from PCOS and miscarriage, could you please suggest how can the body recover?
Um, that's yeah, that's a tough one. First, I just want to just say I'm sorry that that happened. I think miscarriage is something that is very common, but it's very hard to talk about, and it's extremely emotional.
Yeah.
So yeah, just kind of expressing some empathy there. Um, from the stance of miscarriage, you definitely want to be focusing on replenishing your iron stores. You're likely going to lose a lot of blood through a miscarriage. So, replenishing your iron stores. And then, I'm a little hesitant to give advice on something like this that is so personal, and it really depends on the situation. I would say finding, in your case, probably finding a holistic doctor that can help you, that's going to test your hormones, that's going to do a full workup for you, um, and support you in the way that you need to be supported is probably the way to go.
Right, right. Yes. Getting the right support is one of the most important things when going through something like a miscarriage. Can we talk a little bit more about fertility and specifically infertility? How can balancing hormones help when someone is experiencing infertility?
Balancing hormones is key when you're thinking about trying to conceive. So first, we want to think about progesterone, along with the role that I've already outlined it plays. It's basically considered your pregnancy hormone. So adequate progesterone is needed both to get pregnant and also to sustain a healthy pregnancy. So that's something that you definitely want to be testing if you're considering trying to conceive. And we typically test this a week after ovulation and determine if your progesterone levels are adequate. This is a really interesting one because to me, I would say it's pretty low hanging fruit. Get it tested, work on increasing your levels. Most conventional doctors and most, not all, um, do not agree, or they don't see the connection, or they kind of will tell you, oh, progesterone doesn't matter. This isn't going to do anything for you. So if that's the case, if your doctor is telling you that, I would strongly encourage you to find a new doctor. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
progesterone's a big one. Also, um, balancing your hormones is going to lead to regular periods, and you need regular periods to basically conceive, because regular periods are a sign of regular ovulation.
Hmm.
If you're having these really long periods and you don't know when you're ovulating, it can be really hard to time your fertile window, which is, when you need to have intercourse in order to get pregnant. So I would say those are kind of the two big things with balancing your hormones when it comes to fertility.
Yeah, and how early someone should start balancing hormones if they want to get pregnant, if they have a like a time frame in mind when they want to start trying.
Yeah, I would say 3 to 6 months. So, if you're pregnant and you haven't done anything, that's not a reason to freak out or anything. But if you have the luxury of planning for the future and saying, okay, we're gonna start thinking about trying to start having a baby, then 3 to 6 months is kind of the sweet spot um, for balancing your hormones. Because as mentioned, it does take a little while. So if
Yeah.
you find out you have low progesterone, working to increase that is going to take at least 3 months. So kind of getting
Hmm.
ahead of the game can be really beneficial.
Right. What are some other steps that can be taken within this 3 to 6 months before starting to trying to conceive?
Quality prenatal is going to be the first step. And this is actually more challenging than you would think it is. There's so many prenatals on the market that
Yeah, the
that are
shelves in the stores are
not.
like overflowing with prenatal vitamins.
Yes, and they're not. Most of them are not sufficient for what you need going
Okay.
into pregnancy. The most common things I see are either they have all the nutrients you need, but not enough of them, or
Hmm.
they have the nutrients you need in a less bioavailable form. Um,
Okay.
I have a favorite prenatal. It's called We Natal. Have you heard of it?
I haven't. I
You should
haven't.
look them
So
up. It's a
yes.
really cool company. It was founded by two women. They're best friends, and they were both struggling with infertility at the same time in their lives.
Okay. How do you spell
And
the name of the brand?
We Natal,
We.
WENATAL. I can also
Okay.
give you a link. I
Yeah.
have an
Yep.
affiliate code with them.
Okay,
Um,
amazing. We'll
so it was
share
founded by
this
these
one
two
too.
women struggling with infertility, and they actually started their company by developing a male prenatal, which is pretty
Male
unheard of.
prenatal.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I never heard
yeah.
about it.
That's why it's called We Natal. They have a
I
female
see.
and a male.
Oh, I
Um,
love that because there are
yeah,
two parts to
yeah,
getting
exactly,
pregnant.
exactly.
We
And I
often
think
forget this.
very, very infertility has been positioned in our society as a women's problem.
Yeah.
And so many women are taking the proactive steps, getting on a prenatal, getting their blood work done, balancing their hormones, and that's 50% of the picture. So
Right.
a lot of times with infertility, it could be a sperm issue. And
Mm-hmm.
so getting your partner on board, getting him to take supplements, getting him to reduce his alcohol, marijuana, caffeine intake, those are all going to support his sperm health and make it easier for you as a couple to try to conceive.
Stress
Um,
levels probably
Stress levels
influence.
are huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Okay.
so I'll give you the link for that prenatal. And then as we mentioned, doing functional testing is is really important. And then starting to track your period. So we mentioned a couple apps, just tracking your period so you know when it comes. And as you get closer to trying to conceive, it could be a good idea to start doing some LH testing and basal body temperature to understand exactly when you're ovulating so you can really time up your fertile window.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Ashley. Those are great tips. And I think for my last question for you today, I would like to ask you for our community members, for women who don't plan to get pregnant or don't want to have children, what are your suggestions? Why is it important to still look at hormones and keep them in balance?
It's still super important. Hormones do so much more than support fertility. Um, they support energy, mood, sleep, focus. I could go on and on, sex drive,
Yeah,
metabolism. So basically, they support how you feel on a daily basis. Um, so I think the incentive is feeling good. I think it's also important to be forward thinking. Balancing things now can make a huge difference later, specifically with the transition into perimenopause and menopause. Um, that can be a challenging transition. And if you take the time and put in the effort to balance your hormones today, that transition is going to be easier for you. And it's kind of like putting habits into place when things are more stable. So think about
hmm,
entering perimenopause and maybe there's a bit of a roller coaster and then trying to change your diet, change your sleep habits. But
yeah,
if you have that foundation built before you go into into that huge transition, you're kind of setting yourself up for success there. So
right, right. Because perimenopause is something that every one of us is going to experience, no
yeah,
matter if we choose to have children or not. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
and I've heard this term like staying on top of perimenopause, so basically having all these lifestyle changes in place before
Yeah.
you even start experiencing disruptive symptoms can like help you go through it much smoother, much easier.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I love that. I love that. I do have a couple of questions that our followers sent right
Sure.
before this live. And one of them is related to what we just discussed. If you don't have severe symptoms, should you worry about hormonal imbalances?
I would say it depends. First, thinking about what does severe mean to you? Because as I mentioned earlier, I think women are conditioned to kind of downplay their
Yeah.
symptoms. So if if you feel good, then it might not be necessary. But what is good to you? Like if you're having cramping, if you're having breast tenderness, bloating, cravings, those are all signs that there likely is an imbalance. So even if you've
Mm-hmm.
been conditioned to kind of just deal with it, it might still be worth getting tested. But it's kind of up to you to decide, is this truly uncomfortable, or because not everybody has hormonal imbalances. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it's going to depend on what you consider severe.
Yeah, that's a very important point that you brought up, that we are having periods from a very early age, and we start considering all the symptoms associated with periods as normal,
Right.
while you can actually feel much better. You just have not been feeling better through all of
Yeah.
these menstrual cycles in your life. Yeah, that's a
So
good point.
with periods, like you're never gonna completely eliminate the symptoms. We do have periods. We are women. Our hormones do fluctuate. Is it natural to have energy fluctuations? Yes. Typically, we have more energy in the first half of our cycle, and it tapers as we get down to our closer to our period. So we're going to crave rest. But is it normal to have debilitating fatigue before your period? No, that's definitely not
Mm-hmm.
normal. Same thing with cramps. You might have slight discomfort. That's normal. But if you're in bed, staying home sick from work because of cramps, that's not normal. So there's kind of a
Right.
spectrum, and you have to decide, like, is this discomfort or is this something that my body is trying to communicate with me?
Right, right. Totally makes sense. And what about weight gain? How do you know if like the stubborn weight that you have and you cannot lose is related to your hormonal imbalances?
Again, I think my most common answer is going to be it depends. Um, Hormonal imbalance is a pretty broad term. So there's a few different cases where your hormones can be impacting your weight. Um, a lot of women notice that they gain weight the week before their period, right before their period, or during their period. And this is typically more of like a water weight. You
Mm-hmm.
feel bloated and puffy. That definitely is hormonal. That's going to be something that is related to low progesterone. PCOS is often associated with stubborn weight or weight gain. And again, this is a metabolic issue with blood sugar. So it's not necessarily cyclical where you're going to gain weight at certain parts of your cycle, but it is related to your hormones. And again, treating the underlying metabolic imbalances there is the key to weight loss there. And then cortisol can also be an issue when it comes to, when we think of like that stubborn belly fat. And while that's not really just like a women's hormonal issue, or there is some correlation with our cycle. We're more sensitive to stress in the second half of our cycle, which can impact cortisol. But if you're doing things like fasted workouts, or doing high intensity interval training, more than 2 or 3 times a week, those things are going to have an impact on your cortisol, and it's basically going to release too much cortisol into your body, which is going to cause you to store fat. So even
Right.
though we are told, and this comes back to the studies done on men issue, but we're told that fasted workouts are going to burn fat, high intensity interval training is going to burn fat, it can actually have the opposite effect
Yeah.
and tell your body to hold on to that fat rather than burning
Right,
it.
right. I was so shocked when I discovered that I cannot work out fasted, that I'm actually doing worse for my body and not getting the
Mm-hmm.
results that I hope. And I think when I found out about it from Dr. Stacy Sims and I changed my routine and I started eating breakfast first thing in the morning, it's been so much easier to work out, like to go for this workout and to
Yeah,
see the results. That's something that we should know like much earlier in
yeah,
our lives.
definitely.
Yeah, I love that. I think you shared some great tips and related to weight loss. So are you saying that there are simpler ways to try and change your everyday routines to balance your hormones before you even think about medications like GLP-1s
Oh,
and
100%.
okay.
Yeah,
Are
I
you
think
helping with this within your program?
with weight loss,
Yes, is this something that you can also help with when a
it's something
client
I can
comes
help with.
coming to you?
It's not a focus for me.
Hmm.
Being fully transparent, I do have a history of an eating disorder, so I treat my clients with that knowledge, with that, because I think it's so common for women to have
Totally.
disordered eating habits or body dysmorphia. So I never lead with weight loss because
Hmm.
I just, to me, that is not the highest priority thing that I think women should be focusing on. But I
Right.
think it tends to be kind of um, a benefit of hormonal balance. So let's work
Totally.
on your hormones and work on your eating habits, work on your exercise habits, and naturally you're likely going to lose weight as a result.
Totally. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for such an informative session today, sharing so many amazing tips with our followers. And can you tell a little bit how to start working with you, how the program looks like, and like everything else that women should know before like getting in touch with you?
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram, Solara Health and Wellness. Also link to my website. I offer a 4 month hormone health coaching program. So we're going to look at things like diet, exercise. We'll do some testing if needed, and then alter those things. Look at potential supplementation to bring things back into balance. I also, if you're more interested in working with a doctor, like I said, I do support a holistic hormone doctor. She has a similar program, 4 months, and so happy to provide both links for both me and the doctor.
Yes, please do. We will make sure to share all of these links because I think the tips that you gave today were super helpful. And we also have a special offer for everyone who joined our live today. If you want to test your hormones with Strawberry Health, please DM us live and we will send you a promo code for Strawberry Health Hormonal Test. And
Yay.
thank you, Ashley. It was amazing. I loved our conversation today. Hopefully, it was helpful and useful for everyone who joined. Thank you for joining, by the way. And yes, thank you so much.